report with my dear friend and longtime colleague, David Metzner, managing partner at ACG Analytics in Washington. For the last 12 years, so we've been working together. David has done a fantastic job, and his team, the entire team at ACG Analytics, with our institutional clients in 26 countries now. And I'm very grateful to David. You know, we've been through multiple elections, multiple cycles, China trade war, Brexits. And what's great about working with a team like ACG Analytics, when you're together for a long period of time, you know people's strengths, you know people's weaknesses. And one thing that I've seen for certain over the years is their strength around big elections. In 2016, the Bear Traps report and ACG Analytics put out a number of reports that were leading Trump. And, you know, I really think they kick the tires. They look underneath the surface. And, you know, that's what clients want. That's what clients want. Institutional clients, they can see the media narratives. There's a lot of things underneath the surface that need to be addressed. There's emotions on both sides. This isn't about politics. I care less. It's about getting this right. David, after nearly 25 years on Wall Street, most of that in New York, I've learned one invaluable fact, and that is these analysts on the street wing it when it comes to Washington policy research from New York. They don't spend enough time on the Hill. They try to read the Politico and put out reports. And working at a number of banks, which I have, I've spent many years on different banks, I can tell you that they wing it. They don't spend enough time on the Hill. They don't spend enough time in the hotels and the restaurants and the bars around DC. And I want to thank you for your hours and hours of
we spend a lot of time in work. That's right.
Yeah. No, but I want to thank you for your, I think, hundreds and hundreds of trips back and forth from New York to Washington over the last decade. I mean, you must be on the, air, spend a lot of time on airplanes.
Well, no, we have a philosophy here that, you know, no two investors use research the same way, and no two people invest the same way. So we try to customize our product for the investor. And obviously we cover macro, which would be an election trade, distressed, which would be Puerto Rican debt, GSEs, merger arb, or policy decisions. I mean, everybody in New York, everybody was long Intelsat. We were telling people that just the opposite. Again, same thing with, you know, we could take you through numerous trades that the DC perspective is different. And it is based, Larry's right, we get under the hood, we look at the numbers, particularly here in the election year, try to give you a factual analysis. Similarly, there is a serendipity of being in DC. There are nights I go out, bump into Larry Kudlow, and I can ask Larry a question. And, you know, you put that into your Mosaic Research and you go, wow, that was an aha moment. You know, another moment, I'm walking in the Justice Department, out comes 9 attorney generals. Had a quick conversation about T-Mobile, acquisition of Sprint. They go, oh, that's going to get done. So you go on, and it's the serendipity moments that helps you with your Mosaic Research. And you're right. You know, you can't be in New York City. You can't be sitting there and you parachuting in once a week, because then you're gonna meet with people that reinforce your thesis. All right, we want people that challenge our thesis in order to get it correct, and that's the difference from being here. And look, I actually have a second home in New York. I need to be with investors. I need to understand what they're doing, what they're thinking. But our base case is built around living and working and sharing good policy ideas with people in the government.
And your clients are mainly institutional investors, so your mutual funds, your pension funds around the world, is that pretty much how you line up?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's both. It's across the investor spectrum, from institutional to classic buy-side hedge funds. And it's largely based here in the U.S. and in London. We have a great base of London, a lot of smart macro investors in London. And what they've learned is that you can't rely on Bloomberg and you can't rely on the FT in order to get macro correct when so much risk emanates out of Washington these days.
Exactly. And as we look over the next 12 months, And over the past 12 months, I mean, you're talking about $7 trillion of fiscal and monetary policy out of Washington. And you were extremely valuable to our team in March. And now, as I look forward, let's talk about, first of all, this fiscal deal. So, or lack thereof. But here's an interesting thing. So on the 24th of September, a couple of large banks, one of them begins with a G, threw in the towel on a fiscal deal. And what's fascinating about that is they lowered their fourth quarter GDP estimates. They threw in the towel for a deal this year. And what's fascinating about that is you put out a report and you said, hey, there may not be a deal, but the probability of a deal is accelerating because of the conversation bandwidth that is expanding between Pelosi and Mnuchin.
Yeah, well,
bring us up to speed on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, look, we were negative on a deal getting done for a long time because you can't get a deal done if it's Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell's not in the room. So if he's not in the room, there's not going to get a deal that's going to get done. And our probability went up when both Mnuchin and Pelosi re-engaged. McConnell, for the first time, surfaced in the room. We were skeptical still because for a variety of reasons. McConnell doesn't like to split his caucus before an election. There was obviously prominent members of the Republican caucus in the Senate against the deal. And so to go up to $1.8 trillion deal after they barely passed an $800 billion deal the week before seemed illogical. But we couldn't discount the probability when McConnell entered the talks. It did change the numbers. We did.
Yeah, so let me just get at that for a second for risk takers out there watching. So if you look at 2s, 10s, 2s, 30s and interest rates, treasuries, if you look at gold, silver, if you look at transports versus say the NASDAQ, in that period of say 14, 15 days, the Russell 2000, which are mainly US companies, right? So your Russell 2000 was up 14% from the 24th of September to Friday or so, 14%, and dramatically outperforming the S&P and the NASDAQ. And same thing with the transport. So what the point is to people watching this right now, even though there wasn't a deal done, since the probability increased, you had a pretty substantial trade. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, were made on a deal which never got done. And too many people focus on deals that maybe won't get. Too many people focus on the end game instead of that kind of short-term probability. And that's what I thank you for kind of like making that clear, because a lot of Wall Street strategists just do yes or no. They don't really focus on the near-term probabilities. A trade can go from a 2% probability in terms of Washington policy to say 60-70%, and then back to zero. Millions are made and nothing ever got done, but there was a trade there.
Yeah, we publish among many, we publish all week. Our published work is, we don't sell it as a standalone product, and it's not a 30-page sell-side document. It's to scream, call us in these scenarios. So Tuesday, we put out the weekly macro report, and we follow that up with a live call on Thursday. But Wednesdays, we put out the all-important policy percentages, where we share with our clients our internal score on major macro events. So you can look and see how we're rescoring stimulus. I mean, you can look at how we're rescoring the presidential, control of the Senate, any number of key issues. Some weeks we do Biden cabinet members, Secretary of the Treasury. Makes a big difference if it's Elizabeth Warren or someone else. Okay, so yes, we're constantly putting a percentage on these, and we have a lot of smart people here at ACG Analytics, and we fight it out and try to get the right answer.
Well, let's move to the slides now. So in terms of the slides, I think the biggest thing that the street is now over the last week, if we move to the slides, the street's been practicing or preaching a blue wave, and that blue wave created a pretty substantial reflation move. And so let's talk about the Senate. My first question to you is on the Senate. Number one, if it's a tight Senate, say 50-50, 51 Republicans versus say 49 Dems, or vice versa, 51 Dems, talk about that tight Senate and how that might affect the creation of the next cabinet. So, which is so important, because let's just say it goes to say a blue wave and there's 57 Democratic senators. would there be a left-leaning cabinet in that case? Because that's going to have a massive impact, like you said, the Treasury Secretary on a number of sectors, including financials.
Well, I mean, we'll get back into the Senate a little bit later, Larry, in this, but the key issue in the Senate races, I mean, there's a couple of things that are being debated right now. One is, will they change the cloture rules? I mean, right now you need 60 votes to proceed. If they were to lower that to a simple majority, you'd be in the situation. The Senate would mirror the House, okay, and the minority party in the Senate would have much less influence in negotiating a final package. And the founding fathers actually said, the purpose of the Senate is to cool the passions of the House. And then then you'd also be able to see much easier to.
And again, if I could just say one thing there. So for people watching us right now, what that means in bond language, if you get, say, 57 senators in a blue wave on the Democrat side, and they change that rule, the filibuster rule, and you go from, say, 60 votes to 50, then the spending spigots explode. And there's no governor, there's no control mechanism. And so that would have a potentially powerful effect on bond yields. The curve could steepen 50, 60, 75 bips. Some clients say, well, geez, the Fed's not going to let that happen. Okay, if the Fed doesn't let that happen, that means that negative rates, negative real rates explode because the Fed's going to have to buy a lot more treasuries.
The more Democrats in the Senate, the more a more radical leftist agenda. Period. Whether it's modern monetary theory, Green Deal, a PAC Supreme Court, all of that becomes a lot easier if you change the filibuster or cloture rule. Our thesis is not, we'll take you through it, is that they don't get that blue wave in the Senate. It's still too early to tell. But, the Senate is a very important part of lawmaking in the United States. Joe Biden is a creature of the Senate. I talked to a member of the Biden campaign today, said he's talked about changing the rule in certain circumstances. Hint, back in the court, perhaps. So we'll have to, but it's very, very important. And Joe Biden said, vote for your senator. Well, if you vote for if you keep it close, 51-49, we're going to see more of the traditions of the Senate maintained than if it goes to a blue wave.
And an important thing there for markets is when you have Wall Street that talks up the blue wave for a couple of weeks and the reflation trade gets priced in, if you go back to a split Senate, the entire reflation trade that's been pricing in for many, many months now, we've had an incredible move in the transports, we've had incredible movement in materials, for example, dramatic outperformance of tech in these sectors over the last 2 months. So if it flips back to a tighter Senate, more control on spending, that gives you a dramatically different look at the reflation trade. So it has a big impact on the yield curve, big impact on the first quarter of next year, and a big impact on markets. Can I have that disclaimer at first before we go? That disclaimer page. And just in mind, as we get into markets here, this is just a disclaimer that we put up. We share with all of our research, but for people watching us right now, the Bear Trap Support investment research publication is not paid by any company to recommend securities to any investors. We are completely independent. The Bear Trap Support is published as an information service for subscribers. And so you can take a look here and read this disclaimer, but net, we're trying to add value here without bias. We're not investment, ACG Analytics and the Bear Trap Support are not investment banks. We don't sell securities, and we don't do IPOs or new deals or bond offerings. But just take a minute there to look at that disclaimer. And I would just say in the high print there, in the big print, subscribers should verify all claims and do their own research before investing in any investments referenced in this publication. Okay, let's go to the slides and talk about the first slide, David, U.S. presidential election and some kind of, what is the Black Swan here? in
Here's
terms
the
of
Black Swan. The Black Swan, ladies and gentlemen, is a tied electoral college. Okay, not impossible, as happened before in the 19th century. This is how you get there. Okay, none of these states in this scenario are surprising for Trump to win. Okay, I mean, it gives him Florida. He needs to win. It gives him Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. We believe he's up in Iowa and up in Ohio. So now, how do you get there? Maine and Nebraska award their electoral votes by congressional district. So if you peel off one from each, both candidates get to 269. Then the election is tossed to the House of Representatives. Now, what many probably don't realize here, the Democrats control the House, but they do not have the majority of the delegations. There are 26 state delegations controlled by Republicans, okay? Majority of the congressmen are Republican. Each state gets one vote, and they will vote by their party affiliation. So under that scenario, the House would elect Donald Trump president. If the Senate were to flip the VP to the Democrats, the Senate will pick the vice president. So theoretically, you could have a Biden-Kamala Harris leading our country going forward in the next 4 years. But none of these picks for these are radical. Okay, he needs these states, Trump, to get reelected. He needs Pennsylvania. We all know that. We give Biden Arizona, which is a traditionally Republican state, and we give Biden Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. So this is not a radical map in the least. It's a very plausible one. So if we're headed in this direction, my advice to investors is, buy a lot of volatility protection or the vol, because this won't be decided until January, and there'll probably be a lot of litigation in front of this. The Electoral College is governed by a law from 1875 that's never been trusted. We didn't know George W. Bush was going to be president. That was one challenge in Florida. What if we have multiple challenges? So that's where we're telling people, we don't think the market's priced in volatility greater than maybe 2 weeks after the election. We think it's a bigger story, and a watch for that. Yeah,
exactly. So the street consensus a month ago was for a much tighter race, and the December contract and the VIX futures curve was really expensive relative to where it is now. Since then, the December contracts exploded, but the November contract, as you said, expires on the 18th of November. So after the election, it's still fairly expensive. So the markets, it's fascinating. If you look at the markets, even though vol has come in, volatility in the VIX, it's still not, if you just look underneath the surface, it's not pricing in a blue wave. It just isn't. A blue wave the VIX futures curve should be a lot steeper. It's still relatively flat. And so if you look underneath the surface, you just don't see that blue wave there. Next, you want to go to the next slide?
Please.
Okay, key races in the Senate, David. So just my view, just talking to clients today, we have a Bloomberg chat with 600 institutional investors in there. Clients are talking about this John James in Michigan is surging. And remember, that's the Democrats.
Let's pause. Yep. This is data for both the presidential and the Senate.
Okay.
All right. We have a very weak Michigan senator. If I ran into him in a McDonald's, I wouldn't recognize him. John James is a very accomplished African-American businessman in Michigan. Polling has him up 1 point. Polling has Biden up 4 within the margin of error. James up 1. Very odd. I mean, most people today don't split their polls, okay, or their polls don't split their votes, and so that's an anomaly. I mean, something's going on in Michigan on one side of that transaction. So, I mean, having a strong senator there is very, very interesting. We think we go through. I mean, Maine, Susan Collins, again, they've ranked voting there. I don't know how that's legal. She's a longtime trusted incumbent. Her vote for Kavanaugh has hurt her in this election. North Carolina, Tom Tillis has been incumbent down, scandal in the Democrat, sexting scandal. Iowa, Jody Ernst, we think is going to win. Cory Gardner in Colorado, I think, is down 9, and McSally in Arizona is most likely down.
So the numbers. So just simple math. I always start. So right now we're 53, 47, correct? And so if the Republicans pick up Michigan and they pick up Tuberville in the Alabama seat, that's a done deal. So that's automatic. Then you go to 55. So then you work your way back from that. So if GOP takes 2, then the Democrats have then the GOP's at 55. Democrats have a lot of work to do to flip the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, then it comes down to, look at Montana, very tough race for Republicans, incumbent Senator Daines against popular Governor Bullock. It's a fairly even, though, race right now. So it could go either way. Trump is going to win Montana strongly. Georgia, this is another black swan. We may have a runoff in Georgia, and we won't know that control of the Senate could be determined January 5th in a special election.
Yeah, so
except for Colorado and Arizona, extremely tight races here, okay, with 3 weeks to go. And so I leave that with people, and the Democrats are vastly outspending the Republicans.
Yeah, everybody's talking about, the White House race and, contested election. But you have to understand, if you're betting on reflation or a stimulus package, a large one, and the convexity is pretty powerful, because if Democrats are up at 55 seats, 56 seats, the package in the first quarter could be $5 trillion, 3 to 5 trillion, even some, crazy high. That'd be the most speculative bet. But if a tighter Senate, and with Senate control out to January not being decided, that slows down your fiscal lever for the first quarter, and therefore a number of trades out there could be getting ahead of themselves. Right. In other words, more people are looking at the White House contested election. What if there's a contested election in 3 or 4 Senate seats?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's going to be litigation. You can count on. You got to remember, folks, mail-in balloting. Certain states have done it. Other states have not done it. Okay, and you're going to see later in the presentation, early mail-in balloting is way up, and it took 6 weeks to decide Democratic primary in New York City. Okay, so they just do not have the processing infrastructure. It's just so much larger than it's ever been before. Okay, next slide.
Next slide. What do you see here, David?
Here we see the where there's a few states that are really being, it's a visual of the last slide. Okay.
Yeah.
But again, these are the key, the red states, these Senate states are where if Trump runs strong, it's going to, in 2016, you pulled a number of those senators across the finish line. We're never up, always down 1%. It's, again, toss up. We only have one toss up state, and that's that listed here, and that's Maine. The rest, is either,
Michigan. But Michigan's now becoming potentially not a toss up, because if the polls have James up 1, as we saw in 2016, the Michigan polls were off by 6%, because I think Trump was either down to -1 and he won by 6. So
let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
This is a piece. I never saw this slide before today, and I thank our research team for putting this together. Okay, look at the change in non-traditional voting between Pennsylvania between 2016 and 2020.
Okay. 2016 is on the left. Yeah, 2020 on the right.
So the change is 877%. Now, who's going to process those ballots? All right, and look at the percentages here now in the key battleground states. Trump lost New Hampshire by 2,000 votes last time. Again, now, people have to keep in mind that Dartmouth and University of New Hampshire are remote learning, so those students aren't voting. However, the Dems in that state have out-registered Republicans, just the opposite of Pennsylvania, where they're, as I said to you earlier, the Republicans are up 200,000 seats. Virginia, we think, again, large increase. Largely, we think that state will stay Democratic. Minnesota, Michigan. What's people need to note here is that in some of these states, they tell you which party has returned the most votes, and the Democrats have been voting early. And that's traditionally what we expect. The purpose of this slide is to really show you the challenges of getting through this election cycle. Each state has a different rule, right? States are local elections. So certain states must be postmarked by election day. Certain states have, everybody's doing it differently. And so that will lead to a much more challenging counting process.
So this is basically pointing toward potential litigation risk in Senate races.
It delays the ability. If it took 6 weeks to count a congressional district, how long is it going to take you to come to a conclusion in a state?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so again, it's also interesting. If these votes were mailed in early, maybe you voted before you saw the first debate, right?
Yeah.
You voted before Trump had COVID. So there's a lot of unknowns here as we move forward. But this is our part of our case for an election that can't be called, leading to market volatility, as we said.
Next slide.
All right. Well, this shows you, which states we've seen a surge in voter registration. We have the actual numbers here.
So your team, the last couple of weeks,
this is unique to us. We actually put this out of Twitter. It had 166,000 impressions 2 weeks ago. Okay, Florida, again, all these states under red, there have been more Republicans registered to vote than Democrats. Okay, North Carolina, has deregistered Democrats. This is a counter narrative. No one has told you this. Okay, everyone thinks the Republicans have had the revolver at their head the last 4 years with powder burns on it. In fact, you have to remember one other fact as we go forward. All right, is that Trump has 100,000 people knocking on doors. Okay, conventional wisdom, I'm told, okay, by people that do politics for a living, that knocking on doors is worth 1% in those states. Florida, we haven't had an election that's ever been more than 1%. Okay, either Senate races, the statewide races have all been within 1%. So that's another unknown variable. You're not reading about that. We got 100,000 people eating pizza and hanging literature and knocking on doors for Donald Trump. Okay, very different. And the Democrats, with their COVID distancing, have decided not to do that aspect. They have different get out the vote efforts, but I was shocked by this data myself when we first pulled it up, and I was shocked. And it took a lot of smart people that work at ACG Analytics to put it together. And that's Maine too. As I said, Maine awards electoral votes by congressional district.
So let's look at the next slide. Let me just kick it off here, because clients in our institutional chat on Bloomberg have been talking about this slide in particular. And David, I just want to say something, because you and I spoke before, but what this is about, it's about new registration. So voters registering to vote. And in Pennsylvania, when you put the slide together, please just talk about the data from yesterday versus when you put the slide together.
The data has gone up 35,000 new Republican registrants in 10 days since we put this data together.
So that means more Republicans are registering to vote.
More people are registering to vote as Republicans.
Yes, than Democrats. And net, they've picked up how many?
Well, 200,000.
200,000 more. So there's 200,000 more Republican voters in Pennsylvania than there was.
Registered in 2020 than 2016.
So that sounds like a lot of people concerned about shale, doesn't it? Yeah. I don't know.
Well, as I said, the decrease in fracking is a lot of GDP, and some people are feeling it personally. But look, I never would have known, I never would have guessed that 3.7% less registered Democrats in North Carolina. Very important state, both presidentially and in the Senate race. Iowa, the Democrats have registered more. Same thing
So in Iowa, Democrats are up 30,000 in Iowa relative to 2016. And Trump won that state by quite a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. More deregistrations in Nevada, and Maine second is it's up slightly, but that'll be a very tight race. So again, what we're trying to tell you in these last two slides is there's a narrative out there of the blue wave, and everyone is they're showing you all this rush to vote early in these blue states, but there's been some hard on the ground Republican work done in these other states. I had someone in the Trump campaign tell me they gave me voter registration data that was completely wrong, but it was anecdotal. Anecdotally, it's there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there, and particularly in journalism right now. So
you got to be so careful. So much noise.
Yeah. So I want to say that we're not calling a winner. We're calling a very close election here, ladies and gentlemen. That's what this narrative we're trying to give you. Okay? So it's not the blue wave election. It's a close election that we probably won't know the end result of.
So there's certain trades that were pricing in a blue wave. I mean, the solar stocks were almost 100% above their 200-day moving average. So that's a sector that I think was much overcooked. So much of the Biden blue wave was priced into solar and the Green New Deal. And this Green New Deal, to me, David, I think is so important because it smells to me like in 2016, Wall Street Research wrote 22 research reports in the fourth quarter, literally promising investors infrastructure. And and the entire reflation trade, you had the Treasury curve steepen by more than 100 basis points. So if you Treasury sold off viciously, copper names were up 100%. You just had this incredible Russell 2000 dramatically outperformed the NASDAQ. So because of this expected infrastructure plan, literally much of that reflation trade was priced in. And lo and behold, I was on the phone with you guys in January, and your analyst, John East, said, be very careful because Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, there was some chatter around the Hill that they might try to push healthcare in front of infrastructure. And lo and behold, that occurred. And then the entire, by July of 2017, the entire reflation trade unwound. We're talking like moves of 50, 60% up in equities, 50, 60, 100%, 70% declines in some stocks. And then lo and behold, they finally delivered tax cuts after the street gave up on fiscal initiatives. They finally came out with the tax cuts in November. I sense the similar thing with this Green New Deal. I mean, if you just look in the market at energy and some sectors, this Green New Deal has dramatically been priced in. And I just, is your take that this Green New Deal, if Biden moves to the center, could that get pushed out to say if Biden wins, pushed out to say 2023, 24, 25?
Well, look, you're talking about, if Biden wins, the Democrat takes the Congress and the Senate's close. What you're alluding to is that Paul Ryan made a strategic mistake, and that he sold to Trump, that it would be a victory to repeal Obamacare, where presidents usually get a 100-day grace period. I don't think this guy started off Trump with lack of grace period before he was sworn in. But if they'd gone with infrastructure early on, you would have gotten that bill through the Congress. And it's generally wiser to start with something that's less contentious than repeal or Green New Deal. So you're right. If you go highly contentious right away, your avenue for compromise isn't great. Although Biden, Biden is the question that Biden is, how far is he trapped by the left wing of his party, which is growing. He's called himself a bridge to something else. In the Obama administration, when they once sent Joe Biden, McConnell called Biden and said, don't you guys know how to negotiate down there? And this was during the fiscal cliff, and Biden went up to the Hill, and then people griped that he gave too much away. But Biden comes out of the tradition of the Senate, which due to the cloture rule is one of negotiation. So we'll have to see, keep our eye on that. Now,
in terms of, just to get back to that first question, I mean, so if it's a tight, say it's 50-50 Senate or 51-49 on either side, does the Biden cabinet have to move center? Because to get those people approved and to move and to actually govern, do you see a potential change in the expectations around the cabinet from, people have been expecting a very left-wing cabinet, maybe it's a centrist cabinet?
I think, look, we've got our calls on the cabinet, both particularly Treasury and State, we think are going to be mainstream. Insiders in the Biden campaign said half the cabinet will be women. That's, I don't think it makes a difference. Competence is competence. So good, great if that's the case. I don't think it is for Treasury or State. Again, it's as we learned under Obama, the executive branch has the ability to make rules, but making rules has a process. Getting rid of rules is another rulemaking process. So yeah, you could regulate the economy. I would expect more EPA rules, right? I mean, we've had a very deregulatory EPA case. I think both Republican and Democratic moods have changed when it comes to antitrust at justice. We could see different kinds of enforcement there. But again, we may have, Biden may prove, if the Senate, depending on the Senate outcome, to be a transitional president with really not a lot happening over the next 4 years.
So to me, the trade with the most convexity, and where you're probably I think ACG and yourself, David Metzner, are the strongest on the street in the GSE trade. I mean, the banks try to cover it, but you're talking about 20% of US GDP that's somewhat housing sensitive. You're talking about a $5 trillion mortgage portfolio at Fannie and Freddie. So this is probably one of the most important issues facing us in this election, is not getting a lot of press. But if Trump wins, and I still think Trump's going to pull it out here, but then it's a big win for the GSE position. But if Biden wins, the consensus is that the trade's in trouble. Just kind of go through, give us an update. Keep it simple for the audience.
That's a whole separate phone call. All right. I think most people that have invested in GSE preferreds or common have been following the government's been sweeping the profits to the Treasury since 2012. Before that, they were obligated to pay a 10% dividend on the money they drew from Treasury. We will see they're entering the regulatory season. Mark Calabria, the director, to end the conservatorship and allow them to build capital to an eventual capital raise. Should Trump get reelected, that's probably the purest trade, because that will happen over the next 4 years in a steady drumbeat measure. If Biden wins, you will see most likely certain key aspects of it happen before the third week of January. And then there is a case at the Supreme Court which will decide whether Obama's actions, both with the sweep, were constitutional or permitted under the Administrative Procedure Act, which governs the rulemaking process in the United States. So that trade has handcuffs on Biden due to the Supreme Court. Decisions will have to be made. And the progressive community, which has not been widely reported, supports recapping them as long as they maintain their commitment to affordable housing and other goals. But we should not spend, I think, Larry, that's
God, no. I
just enough. We're happy to talk to you in more detail should you want to talk. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this just gives you another roadmap. I mean, we know. Listen, it's interesting. There's more registered Democrats in Florida and North Carolina. We're still calling those states for Trump. Pennsylvania, same way. Again, Pennsylvania, the reason Donald Trump won in Pennsylvania is that the urban cities like Philadelphia underperformed, okay? And the rural counties, not the suburban counties, the rural counties delivered twice as many votes for Donald Trump as they did for Mitt Romney. And again, it's hard to believe Republicans could lose Arizona, but it's very close right now. But the Senate race, it looks like the Democrats will pick that up.
That's why it's so important. Polls, you have to remember, Donald Trump won 2,600 counties in America, and Hillary Clinton was just under 500. So in order to poll effectively, you really have to sprinkle the polling all around to many different spots to get an accurate picture. If you're polling in any type of urban areas, it just is a waste of time.
Well, yeah,
as you just described, Pennsylvania.
And one of my favorite charts from when we had a deck, we went around London to our macro clients, like, how did this happen? When you showed the county chart, counties in America, it was the entire country except for the coasts. I mean, it was a significant, so people want to go, well, he lost by 2 million, he lost by 3 million votes. You go, yeah, but he won 99% of the counties in the United States. I'll tell you, as we slowly close this out, there's, I do encourage, and again, ACG Analytics is 100% bipartisan. We try to give you the numbers, not get emotionally caught up in the campaign, because there's a lot of things that can make you emotional on both sides. But I was sent a YouTube video of Donald Trump at his Florida rally Monday, and on this rally, he's dancing on stage to the Village People. So I've seen it all. That I never expected to see.
In wrapping this up, I just want investors to know once again, the convexity in the Senate is so important, because think of the sectors out there: hospitality, leverage loans, CMBS, so commercial mortgage-backed securities. There's a lot of airlines. There's a lot of leverage in the U.S. fixed income market. I've been trading bonds for most of my career. And the convexity is spectacular, because if it's a tighter Senate and the large fiscal relief is pushed out, then I see substantial credit risk near term that we have to watch very carefully. Sure, the Fed's there to some extent, but you still have a lot of weaker credits that need fiscal support. And as we look back over the last decade, we had austerity, tea parties. We had a massive austerity revolution in Europe and in the United States. As we look toward next year, our picture is much more reflationary. You have a lot of reshoring in both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, bringing jobs home. If Trump wins, I see a much harder line on China. So therefore, you got to expect some problems there. Trump's going to be basically unleashed on China. And just, either a Biden administration or a Trump administration, with the amount of debt monetization, with universal basic income, with the Fed and their new programs, very, very creative programs. It's almost it's almost a very socially responsible Fed now relative to 3-4 years ago. So you have all kinds of fiscal levers that weren't there in the last decade. And therefore, the trade is much more reflationary, and it takes a very special, I think we could have a very spectacular rotation out of this. But if any follow-ups, we can do a private call with ACG Analytics and our team at the Bear Trap Support. We do calls with institutional investors in 26 countries on a regular basis. But Thanks. Anything else in closing, David?
No, listen. It's 3 weeks could be an eternity in this campaign. We think it's very, very tight. Remember, I want to just remind people what a year it's been. Pre-COVID, we had 3.6% unemployment. Then we had the COVID shutdown story. We had the civil unrest story, right? We had we had the CARES Act debates. When we had we had impeachment earlier in the year. We had Trump getting sick, Trump getting healthy. We have a Supreme Court nominee fight going on right now. So we don't know what other stories are going to be told in the next 3 weeks. But this is a year where we never seem to have the final curtain on the year. It's never quite over. And I have a notion we're going to see a fascinating end to this campaign, one more debate. Again, there probably aren't a lot of independent voters left. Our head of research, Don East, says it really comes down to 16 counties in the country. They're going to elect the next president. I assume both candidates are spending their money wisely there. But Larry, thank you very much. We enjoyed our time with you. Great conversation, and happy to engage with people as they, it's going to be a lot, very, very market impactful next 3 months, 3.5.
Okay, look forward to following up with private calls. And if we could just have that disclaimer one more time up for closing. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. And it's David A. Metzner on Twitter, and it's at ACG Analytics on Twitter. I think must follows of the day. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.